Hey there, I'm Tom. I'm here today with a historian specializing in American history, Abram Collette. Welcome.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Alright, so let's get down to business. Today we're focusing on the Great Migration. So, in a nutshell, what is the Great Migration?
Well, in the broad sense, the Great Migration is just the mass movement of 6 million African Americans from the southern parts of America to the northern parts of America between the years of about 1960 and 1970.
So, what were some of the experiences of all of the migrants that were flooding out of the South?
Well, actually, I just recently finished a book, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, that follows three characters during that time period and through their experiences of the Great Migration. Robert Pershing Foster, one of the characters, for example, after serving overseas as a military physician, returned home only to find out that he was unable to serve in his hometown as a physician. So he moves to Los Angeles after these injustices that he's been forced upon. And he, like him and many other African Americans of the time, he was forced to start over his life in the new land. Robert traveled from Monroe, Louisiana to Los Angeles, California, a 5-day journey for what he had hoped to be a better life for himself.
As millions of African Americans flooded the area, how did this influence the culture and atmosphere of North America?
As we look at the South in the 20th century, we see a massive shift in the population. 36% of citizens in the South were African American, and within that, about 45 of those African Americans left the South. With the vast movement of African Americans being thrown into a completely new society, aspects from both cultures moved, creating an entirely new perception of the North and leaving the South desperate for workers. Robert, in Los Angeles, used his culture and experiences he acquired from growing up in Louisiana to make a successful business. Robert had served in the Korean War in Australia, where he had worked as an army doctor, so naturally, Robert, starting a medical practice upon arriving in California, other migrants, African Americans, felt at home with Robert. They loved his southern bedside charm and admired his northern-style education. But this was not just given to Robert. Upon arriving in Los Angeles, Robert took a job at an insurance company. Beneath him, yes, but he needed the money. And in the long run, these patients he would later treat would be the original insurance clients. Robert's career only really started to take off when Ray Charles wrote Hide Nor Hair, a #1 hit song that mentioned Dr. Foster, as a way to thank Robert for accompanying Charles on a tour after the fatal cut on his hand.
Well, I called my Dr. Foster, and when the girl answered the phone, I got a funny feeling the way she said Dr. Foster had gone.
We can also see the merging of the two ways of life in Robert and his wife, Alice Clement, who grew up as a well-to-do college headmaster's daughter, who finds herself having to cook traditional Southern-style dishes that her husband was so accustomed to. Robert refused the new Betty Crocker-age food that Californians were eating. Robert wanted all the privileges of the North, but still wanted the Southern culture, and this is showed through his work, which was everything to him, and his patients knew it.
Now, what happened to the communities that the African Americans flooding out of the South were?
Well, Harlem was originally, for example, was originally an all-white community created by the Dutch in the 17th century. But when African Americans started to flood the city, the prominently Dutch white community became a safe haven for migratory settlers. The more migratory Americans settled within the community, Harlem became less and less desirable. Wilkerson even goes into Robert's decision to move into an already established interracial community for him and his family. Robert states, "I didn't want any trouble for my wife and daughters, and I didn't want to make no political statement. I just wanted to buy a house like any other Californian."
Robert seems like he, as many other African Americans of the time, wanted equal rights and were willing to try anything to achieve what is theirs.
That is true. Robert was obsessed with fitting in. He needed to fit in not only to a segregated society, but he also had pressures from his father-in-law, family back home, friends, and wife that he needed to succeed and be welcomed in an equal in an upper-class African-American society. Robert even goes as far to fit in as to take a trip to Las Vegas with a group of his close friends who had also migrated. Robert was pushing back on the society he was born into. African Americans were slowly taking back what was their human right, meant for everyone. But like their lives dictated, Robert and his friends found discrimination anywhere they went. Upon arriving at a hotel, Jimmy Gay, a civil rights activist at the time, who was known to get African Americans into Vegas, had made the reservations for, there was surprisingly no vacancy for the party. Nevertheless, Robert and his friends were able to contact Jimmy and acquire rooms, but backlash was inevitable in every situation.
Now, as most of us are aware, music was drastically changed because of this migration. Can you give me some details on the topic?
Well, in Chicago, for example, similarly to Harlem, a huge influx of African Americans caused communities to be prominently African American. The migratory African Americans took with them their own style of music. That, combined with the already flourishing musical community, turned into a whole new branch of jazz. Or some historians believe that it actually created today's jazz itself.
How does Robert's story end?
I think Merry-Go-Round, the poem by Langston Hughes, really applies to what Robert has endured. It reads as follows. Where is the Jim Crow section on this merry-go-round? Mister, 'cause I want to ride. Down south where I come from, white and colored can't sit side by side. Down south, on the train, there's a Jim Crow car. On the bus, we're put in the back, but there ain't no back to a merry-go-round. Where's the horse for a kid that's black? This poem, to me, illustrates Jim Crow South as never-ending, something that is biased. This poem, to me, illustrates Jim Crow South as never-ending, something that is biased. Robert and so many African Americans broke free from the South. Robert had grown up in a society where it was needn't to be said, but known, that Robert and his family were somehow less than someone with differing pigment in their skin. Robert chose to leave everything he ever knew, in hopes to find his equality. Upon arriving in Los Angeles, Robert didn't settle for mediocre. He needed to have and be the best, and everyone needed to know it. In his later years, Robert said, "If anything happened to me tomorrow, I wouldn't have any regrets. I've lived. I've done it all. The world didn't owe me anything." On August 3rd, 1997, Robert endures a fatal heart attack that sent him into a coma. Robert dies peacefully 3 days later, on August 6, 1997. Robert made something of himself when it seemed like the world was against him. Robert never gave up. He would never settle for less than what he knew he was capable of, no matter who told him otherwise.